Hello everyone. Today we are going to learn about the cell theory. So first things first, you should have glued in your vocabulary for cells. And now we're going to talk about the cell theory. These are your notes, okay? Also, you need to make sure when you're done with your notes to pause it and you have submitted that. Remember, if you don't submit it, I do not get it on my end, and it's a grade. Y'all don't forget to do the cell theory reading assignment and the questions. So read it and then answer the questions, okay? When you're done with that, I want you to do the cell theory exit ticket. If you finish, you can go to the Quizlet button on Canvas and look over the cells Quizlet. So y'all will be ready for your test, your cells test that you're going to take in a couple of weeks. All right, so let's talk about the cell theory, okay? We watched that video about who created the cell theory and what are the components. So let's create a thinking map, an anchor chart to help us understand this better, okay? All right, so I'm gonna flip mine sideways so I can have enough room to write. I actually wrote my TEK already. So remember, pause the video when you need to catch up because y'all know I write fast, okay? All right, so here is the cell theory. This is my title, okay? And here's my TEK, 7.12F, recognize the components of the cell theory. So, and I'm going to flip my notebook like this so I will have enough room to write, because remember, I write big. I'm going to leave enough room for my so what statement right here because we are going to write one. All right, so guys, remember that cells are the basic building blocks of life. Every living thing is made up of cells. The smallest living organisms are made up of a single cell. For example, E. coli. That is a bacteria cell. Okay, we'll talk more about bacteria cells later this week. Also, different cells can perform different functions. For example, a muscle cell performs a different function than a stomach cell does. Cells are really tiny. They cannot be seen with the naked eye. They were first discovered with the invention of microscopes, and Robert Hooke observed the first cell in the 1600s. In time, scientists put their observations together to come up with the cell theory. So let's talk about the cell theory. All right, so I'm going to make a brace map. Okay, so look where our thinking maps are and look for the brace map. All right, so right here, I'm going to write the cell theory. All right. Now, I'm not very good at making brace maps, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw these lines here. Okay, this will be number 1. This one is the second component. Okay, and then this is the third component. Okay, you might not want to do it this way yet, but it's your choice. Okay, just remember, you can erase your mistakes. I can't because I'm using a pen. All right, so the first component is all organisms, so all living things are made of one or more cells. Okay, remember, we're made up of cells. We're made up of actually one or more cell. Okay, so we can have a plant cell, which we'll talk more about that later. Okay, a plant cell. I'm going to draw these pictures. We can have an animal cell. These are eukaryotic cells, or we can have a bacteria cell, which is a single cell organism. Okay, and they have these little tails because it helps them to just find their way. Okay, so remember that bacteria cells are made up of one cell, And then animals, plants, fungi are made up of many cells, one or more cells, okay? And who was a scientist who discovered this? His name is Swan, okay? He was he was a German scientist who created this component. All right, so the second component is the cell is the basic unit of life, okay? Now, these are the building blocks of life too, okay? So, okay, and then Swan came up with this theory. And remember, I don't really think abstractly, and I cannot figure out a picture to draw for this. So if you feel like you know how to draw this, you can. I might put actually I'm going to put blocks here. Okay, blocks. Now these remind me of plant cells too, okay? Because when I put all these cells together, then I have tissues, then I have organs, and then organ system, and then organism. All right, that's my example. Okay, so the third component is all cells come from, can y'all see that? Yep, come from pre-existing cells. Okay, what does that mean? The cells are going to divide to form new cells, okay? Now, we'll talk more about asexual reproduction later. That is how cells are made, through asexual. That means that they don't have to go find a mate. They are basically clones of each other, okay? Now, remember that cells can mutate, and sometimes they're not the same, all right? That's how so many organisms are able to survive. All right, so my picture that I'm going to draw is I'm going to have a cell. Okay, this is a cell. This is a eukaryotic cell because it's round. It's going to be an animal cell since it's round. All right, so I have this little cell. It is ready to divide and to create a new cell. Okay, so whenever I see cells dividing, they're gonna like split in half, very similar to what I'm drawing. Okay, you're probably like, this looks weird, but this is, the only thing I can think of right now. So basically this cell is starting to divide, okay, and then eventually they become two separate cells. Okay, hopefully that made sense. Now the guy, he's another German. He actually came up with this part of the cell theory. His name is Virchow. Y'all will read more about these guys in a moment when you start your reading assignment and answering those questions. So let's do our so what statement. Like, what does this all mean? What is this about? Okay, we know that all organisms are made up of cells. Okay. Okay, so like plants and animals are made up of cells. Bacteria is one cell. Okay, that's a prokaryotic cell. So what? Why is this important? Okay, this is important to understand cells are the basic unit of life. Okay, remember that atoms are not alive, so they're not the basic unit of life, because this pen I'm writing with is made up of atoms too. Okay, this paper, even though it was once alive because it came from a tree, it is made up of atoms. It is not made up of cells. Okay, so I'm gonna finish this off. Okay, so because an organism is made up of one cell alone, think of all the functions a tiny cell must have to be able to perform. It needs to be able to consume, store, and use energy to protect itself and reproduce. Different structures within the cell help it perform all the functions necessary to survive. So y'all, think of a cell like a factory. Each structure within the cell that you're going to learn about next week has a function. All right, and we're going to learn more about those functions next week when y'all come back to school. Okay, now as a reminder, I do want you to flip the page. Okay, and I want you to use this, and I want you to write, here, I'll just flip back for a second. I want you to look at your thinking map and write 2 to 3 sentences about what you learned for your thinking map. So if you don't have room, flip your page, write 2 to 3 sentences, okay? When you're done with that, start your reading assignment. All right? Okay, guys, have a good day. Email me if you have any questions. Goodbye.